Well, hello and welcome to the Venue Success Podcast. I'm your host, Tirzah and today I'm continuing in season 1 with my friend and guest today, Kelly Ewell. I'm so very excited to have you here. Kelly and I have probably known each other for a couple of years just through social media. And I knew that she was one of the ones that I wanted to have in season 1 so that you guys could hear her story. And we share a lot of the same passions. But before we get started, it's time for Crazy Stories with Tirzah because people have lost their minds. So I could tell you with confidence that probably 70 to 80% of these crazy stories happen because of alcohol. And if we could have weddings without alcohol, well, maybe they would be boring. I don't know, but definitely a lot less drama. But it was about 18 months ago-ish, and I was helping one of our clients that was a little bit more high maintenance, right? We all have those certain ones that are like, they need a little bit of kid gloves or whatever. And she was just a little slightly unstable, but I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And throughout the process, I found out that she struggles with migraines. And so she has to take painkillers a lot for her migraines. And I was just hoping and praying that on her wedding day that she would not have this terrible thing happen to her. Well, I went up there. It was about 30 minutes before their ceremony, and she's like, Tirzah, I am not feeling well. I think I'm going to have to take some of my migraine medication. And as someone that also has struggled with migraines in my life, I was like, oh no, I really did not want her to have to take the strong medication. But she's like, I don't have a choice. I've got to take it. So she took it, and we're just doing that, the hustle and bustle right before the wedding, getting everyone lined up and all this kind of stuff. And I get her ready to go. I put her down the aisle. Everything seemed fine. It seemed fine. And then about 10 minutes into the ceremony, all of a sudden, she's like, woo! I mean, she's going crazy. She was using her fiance like he was a pole and she was a stripper. I'm not even kidding. It was the craziest thing. And I was just standing in the back and I'm like, what happened? What happened? Well, it was the most awkward ceremony I've probably ever watched. It was like a joke, and people weren't laughing. They were actually very worried. And you're looking at all the people watching the ceremony go down, and they're looking at each other. It's so completely awkward. Her fiance was mortified, right? Well, they come down the aisle, and I went to one of the bridesmaids, and I'm like, what happened? And she goes, Tirzah, I couldn't stop her. She chugged over half of a bottle of champagne before she went down the aisle. And I was like, oh my goodness. So she took this strong painkiller and a half a bottle of champagne, and it hit her in the most insane way. I do have videos on my phone. I do. But I'm like, I don't think it would be right. It would not be right to share these things. But it was so incredibly awkward. But, and it actually, still to this day, I'm just like, are they still married? Like the whole rest. I always feel that way about our couples. You're like, sometimes you feel like some will make it more than others. But her groom was very unhappy, like very, very unhappy. And then she came into the reception and she continued to drink a lot. And it was probably the most intoxicated bride situation I've ever experienced in my life. And so anyway, it's one of the reasons why we are very, very careful about the amount of alcohol that's up in the bridal suites, because you don't want those types of situations happening. And I'm sure that you and I could soapbox on that for a long time. But without further ado, I really want to let Kelly share some of her story today. She is the owner of 48 Fields in Northern Virginia, and she's been in the venue space for about 8 years. And I could tell you, I know a lot of venue owners, and Kelly is one of those that I really deeply respect because she has really dug in deeply to the nuts and bolts about how to run her business efficiently and professionally. And even though you've only been doing it for 8 years, I feel like you've been maybe doing it 15 or 20 because you just have such a great maturity and professionalism about you. So I will stop talking for now. I want to introduce you to Kelly. Tell us a little bit about your origin story, why you decided to open 48 Fields. And I'd also love to know where that name came from. So take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for your kind introduction. I'm so excited to talk to you today. So, yeah, my husband Steve and I own 48 Fields. We bought a property back in 2013 that was a complete disaster. Um, Three barns, two houses, nothing really could be used. Everything needed a lot of love and renovation, but there was so much potential, right? That's the word, right? Potential, so much potential. And it was gorgeous, and we could see what it could be. And we would show friends and family, and they were all kind of like, oh, great, good for you. Yeah, it's going to be awesome, right? Yeah. But we're like, no, trust us, trust us. And so long story short, we've had the property almost 11 years now. Last year, our 10th year was our last big renovation. We finally did the last house on the property, but we started doing weddings back in 2016. Some friends of ours knew what we were doing, and they said, "Oh, we want to get married at your barn." And we
Of
said, "Hey,
course.
are you sure it's not done? It's not ready?" And they said, "No, it's great. It's gonna be perfect. We want to do it." And they did. It was a very small wedding. It was only about 40 people, and it was great. We had a great time. They had a great time. It was a big success, and that just kind of got the ball rolling. We did more weddings that year and grew the next year and grew the next. And, it just the snowball effect. So here we are 11 years later into the property. Um, and the name, I feel like I need a good, fun story because it's not really very exciting when you hear it. But we have 48 acres, and so 48 fields is where the name comes from. So yeah, we are a barn space. Our barn is a little bit different than some. We've got two stories, fully functional, very separate. They both look very different. Downstairs is a very white, bright space. Upstairs, we have all the original woodwork with this cathedral vaulted ceiling. So they're both really different, but both really beautiful spaces. And our brides really like it because it gives them a really good indoor rain plan if they ever need it.
Okay, so I'm just curious. So when you bought the property, the barn was in existence and you renovated. So you spent all of those couple years renovating the existing barn, correct?
We did. It was an old
Okay.
dairy barn. And so when we bought it, it still had all the dairy pipes. It was filled to the ceiling with trash. The walls had been graffiti spray painted. The windows were knocked out. There were no doors. Everything was run off of electrical extension cords from the main house. So I'm surprised nothing ever burned down. And so when you're in a situation like that, everything needs to be done, right? And so it's like, how do you prioritize priorities? Well, we thought, okay, doors and windows, we need to secure the outside of the building first so nothing inside gets damaged or stolen, whatever. And you just kind of work what's the most pressing need right now. Is there a solution for things that we do still need, but maybe there's an interim solution? And so, yeah, it was a lot of years of weighing what's more important. Those things like new electrical and new plumbing, and those aren't the fun things. It's necessary, but I would rather not put on a new roof when I could be thinking about what color paint and what kind of
Right.
tables and chairs do I want. So
Right.
all those fun decisions are made many, many years later.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me about because I believe that there's a lot of people that share your experience with having a property, whether it's a legacy piece of land or something like that, or you buy something and you do similar to what you did. What was that process like with getting your zoning and permits and getting it up to code? Tell us a little bit about that process.
It's a long process. It's a process that nobody knows about until you have to go through it. Many people may have the same experience with their county, but it was a frustrating experience because you talk to the building department and they tell you something different than the zoning department, who tells you something different than the health department, and they don't all talk to each other, it seems like. And we're the kind of people where we want to say, we want to play by your rules. We want to do this right. So tell us what to do and we'll do it. Is there a checklist? Is there like a brochure that we can look through? Like, tell us what we need. And the response back was basically along the lines of, well, we don't really have that, but we'll tell you when you do something wrong.
My goodness.
So it was a lot of conversations and emails and a lot of meetings, and us at one point just kind of saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. You know, tell us if we shouldn't. But we eventually got there. We're an agricultural property. We're
Okay.
zoned agricultural. So that gives us an automatic right to do a certain number of events. Then we became a bed and breakfast. We now have winery designations. So yes, definitely an evolution over the years.
So how many events are you permitted to do a year with kind of your zoning?
Yeah. With the agricultural property, we got to do 10. When we got to bed and breakfast, that let you do 20. But 20 events is also a little vague because how many days long is it? Is it a multi-day thing? Is it a whole weekend? So there's different ways to look at it, interpret it. Same thing with the winery, that gets us even more, but different people interpret it different ways. So people just kind of keep their head down and we
Yep.
do what we do
I
and
love
we're
it.
doing what everybody else does and we're doing what we're told.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
far, knock on wood, we're good and nobody has
Yeah.
raised any
Yeah.
flags for us.
Yeah. And I think that's totally fine. And I think everyone in your similar situation would do the same. So I think that you're totally, I say you're fine if that means
Well,
anything.
every year we have to put in for our permit and we have to tell them what dates that we're doing. And so they know what we're doing. So
Exactly. But it also kind of surprises me how many new venue owners don't understand that you need to play nice with your local county and all of these inspectors. Like, I know our fire inspector, every time he comes out, we chit chat. I'm very friendly with him. Like, it's really important to play nicely. And it is correct that there's a lot of gray areas when it comes to how many events you could do and all of that jazz. So I love what you guys have created. I think it's really cool. And did they make you go through the terrible experience of getting sprinklers in your barn? I'm just curious because they didn't make me do it. And I know a lot of venue owners that they made them get that. How did that work for you guys?
it was a conversation we definitely had. And, of course, it has to do with capacity. It has to do with
Yep.
how many levels and stories you have. As a agricultural property, as a barn, we did not have to do it. Again, it was a gray area. Nobody really gave us a hard yes or a hard no. So we said, we're just going to keep it as is until you tell us that we have to do it differently. And that was kind of the agreement we came to. There's also precedent in our area and this is what the fire marshal told us, this wasn't even us finding out, that there was somebody and so we're on a well. And so that's the big question of how does it work with a well and how big the storage tank and all of that. So there's another property in our county that had to go through all of this. And the determination for them was, okay, the goal of a sprinkler system is to keep people safe and so that you're not caught and trapped if there is ever a fire, basically, is what it comes down to. And so this other property made the argument of, well, what if we just put up a lot of signs? Here's the exit. We're going to light it. We're going to do all the things, basically communicate in a fire. Here's all the exits and here's what you have to do. And my understanding is they came back and said, okay, that works. So they did
Awesome.
not have to put in a sprinkler system. And so the fire marshal told us that story, that if it ever came up again, we could use that as there's other precedent that somebody, it's an issue that kind of just dropped
Yes.
and we never had to
Yes.
follow through with it
Don't
more.
poke the bear, right?
No,
Like, just
no.
don't bring it up. It's so funny. I'm sitting here listening to you talk and I'm like so interested about sprinklers. And I'm thinking, wedding venue owners are such nerds. Like, there's probably no one else that would want to sit and talk about these kinds of things. But I know that our listeners, they care about this stuff because they are in the weeds trying to open their venues, and they're dealing. And like, you would just die if you knew the kinds of things that we had to do as a city venue, like in Charlotte. I mean, they are on you in terms of like zoning and compliance and all this stuff. So I'm always kind of geeking out about like not how easy, but kind of like how easy these more rural venues have it than me being like plopped in the middle of a very big county. So anyway, we will move on from this boring conversation about sprinklers. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you've learned because like I said, I see you in these Facebook groups. I see your advice. I would have often thought, unless you told me that you've been doing this for much longer than you have, you've obviously put your work in to learning how to work well with your couples, and you have a very successful business that you should be incredibly proud of. But what were some of those things that you learned early on that kind of led you to instituting your, like you say, your 28 page contract and some of the more very detailed systems that you have in place, even with vendors. So what was that learning phase like for you in that first 5 years?
I think I had a little bit of an advantage given my previous experiences before having the venue. On one hand, I had done wedding photography for 10 years, so I had been around weddings. I see how things work. I see how to deal with couples. And so, while it's not a complete, same kind of thing, service, that definitely gave me a lot of the background and history of working in weddings. And then I also did corporate event planning for a while too, when I still had my 9 to 5 job. So corporate event planning around, doing things around the country, around the world, you have to be that kind of person that thinks of the details, that thinks of the what ifs, thinks of what the plan B and C and everything is, because when you're in the moment, you're in it. You've got to find the solution, or ideally you just make it happen as it's supposed to from the beginning. So I've always had kind of that analytical mind, and I hate being caught off guard, right? I want to be prepared as much as possible, even though I know that's an impossible feat. But I'm always thinking about what what's the next step? You could say, yeah, we have a cancellation policy. And if you cancel within 6 months, actually COVID is a good example.
Yes, yes.
We want to reschedule. Okay, let's reschedule. And you could just leave it at that. But there's a lot of what ifs. What if they don't pick a date for 3 more months? What if they want to reschedule 2 years in advance? What if they had a Saturday and want another Saturday and you don't have any more Saturdays? So we kind of came up with all the scenarios and said, if this, then that, if this, then that. And that's why our contract is rather long. Some people will probably freak out when they hear it's as long as it is, but I will tell you that I have never had a couple not book us because of a long contract. I have had couples tell us that they appreciate the detail and they appreciate getting everything kind of laid out. And I tell people, these are our policies, these are our terms. They cover from when things are going really well, and they cover for when those unexpected scenarios occur. So we know what we will do if we're caught unaware of something.
I absolutely love that. And, it's like we're tired of talking about COVID, but honestly, I feel like we all grew up a lot as business owners. We were forced to be in a situation where we were thinking through scenarios we've never, ever had to deal with before. One of these days I'll do an episode about COVID, but I think honestly, there were a lot of pros to it. Like I tightened up my contract. I added things that I am just embarrassed that I didn't even have in there before. So there were, as business owners, yes, it was financially terrible. Terrible. I think we lost close to $500,000 in 3 months of contracts, and that's a fair amount of change. But I'm proud of how I handled it. I'm proud of how I watch people like you and others handle it with great integrity. But also, let's circle back a little bit to the vendor element of all of this, because yes, you can have a very detailed contract, and really what you're doing is you're setting expectations, right? That's what a contract is. You're just trying to eliminate those questions. And when they come back and there's a certain particular issue going on, that you always have that foundation to point them back to. And I think that's really, really important. So talk to me about, because I think we do this a little bit differently. How do you handle vendors at your venue? And then what is your relationship with them like?
Sure. It's definitely been an evolution, like everything else, of how we handle vendors. In the very beginning, we always knew that we wanted to have professional vendors. We didn't want your sorority sister being your coordinator. We didn't want grandma making casseroles for everybody. So you had to hire professional vendors who could give us a copy of their business insurance. But we said, beyond that, pick whoever you want, which we quickly learned there are some really good vendors who are, you may be licensed and insured and you be a great vendor, or you might not work really well in our space. So catering being the big one, we then transitioned to say, okay, well, here are our recommendations. We really want you to pick these people, but if you don't, you need to tell us who you're going to pick before, so we can basically approve them. And while most people did that, you had the other people say, well, I don't think I read that part of your contract, or I forgot about it. And we already booked this other caterer and we've already paid them a deposit. So now if I come back and say, well, actually, they're not a good vendor, you didn't follow the contract. Technically, our couple's in violation, but I look like a big jerk if I say, well, I just learned about this 4 or 5 months before your wedding, and you're going to lose money and you're going to have to scramble to find a new caterer. That just isn't good for anybody. So we kind of
Right.
hung and let things happen. And again, we know how that all goes. So now we require a caterer and a coordinator. We do require all of our couples to hire some kind of coordination service that is not us. Caterer and coordinator has to be chosen from our list, no exceptions. But I've got 20 choices for both. A lot of different styles and price points, I tell couples. And if you can't find somebody off of a list of 20, then we might have bigger issues anyway. Any other vendor, photographer, DJ, we certainly have recommendations that we can give people, but they do have the flexibility to find their own vendors for those services. But the big one, caterer, coordinator, they do come from our list.
I love that. So how did you go about vetting those 20 of each?
Experience, who do we like working with in the past? We have learned, well, full service caterers was always a thing. We don't do drop off. Um, we have learned that food trucks are really great for things like cocktail hour, appetizers, or for late night snacks, but they don't do dinner service well. They can't serve 100 people at once. They don't have the staff and
Absolutely.
bartenders and bussing tables, and they don't want to, take their own trash at the end of the night. So we have gotten rid of food trucks for dinner service. And so, yeah, it was really just who treats our space well, who do we work well with, who gives good service to the customers, who has a good product that they can consistently deliver. We always tell people, because, as a venue, you're always getting hit up. We want to be on your preferred vendor list. Yeah. And I tell people, we can't recommend you if we've never worked with you. I don't have anything to recommend without knowing your service. And I don't want to see you just on one day. Maybe you're having a really good day. Maybe you're having a really bad day. I want to see your work consistently over at least 2 or 3 times working at our venue. So it's our reputation on the line, essentially. And couples, they've never planned a wedding before. They trust that we have worked with a lot of weddings. And so we want to be able to be confident in who we're recommending to them.
I love that. And it's such a different model than mine. And I'm always fascinated by it because I feel like you have an opportunity to be a little bit less hands-on in the nitty-gritty of things if you're not, in charge of dinner service and you're not the wedding planner that's holding the bride's hand through every step of the experience. So what is your role on wedding days and why did you choose this model, I guess? Are you trying to be a little bit less hands-on or what was your thought process with that?
It would seem like we're less hands-on with all of that. However, we get told by many coordinators that we do a lot more than other venues in the area. And they, as the coordinator, always appreciate that. And it's things like tables and chairs. We do have tables and chairs, so our staff will set those up for ceremony and reception typically. If we have to repurpose tables, we're going to shift those around during the day. We tell couples we're with the venue. We're focused on the venue, making sure the venue is there to serve you as you want it to. So what's the temperature? Grandma's always cold. The groom's always hot. It's a fine line you got to walk. Lights, we have lights on dimmers. We're always adjusting the ambiance as the night goes on. There for general questions. Are there spills that need to be cleaned up? Is there more toilet paper in the bathroom that has to be restocked? So things like that. Previous to the wedding, we do a lot of things like linens do come through us. I mentioned we're a winery, so any wine has to come through us. We also provide non-alcoholic beverages. I feel as a winery, we have a responsibility to make sure that there is non-alcoholic drinks as well. We used to let couples bring in all their non-alcoholic beverages. Probably 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know what, there was just a string of weddings one spring, like 5 in a row, where one of them just didn't show up with any water. They didn't think they needed it. And one showed up with just one of those like 35 packs of bottles for 120 people. And they thought that would be great for the whole day. Caterers have shown up without ice. They've shown up, oh, look, the napkins got left on the truck back at the warehouse an hour and a half away. Guess we don't have napkins tonight. And so it's
Yep.
or they would order the wrong size linens despite what we told them about this is the size
Yep.
of our table.
Yep.
And so all of these things, they ultimately come back on us because the
Yes.
guests, they don't know any of the vendors. They just know they're going to a
Absolutely.
wedding at 48 Fields. And if it's good, 48 Fields is great. If the food is terrible, we didn't provide it, but that's still our fault because we're the only name they know. So a lot of these things we did to kind of protect our reputation and to give the couples a more consistent experience, to know that things were going to go well, that they're expecting to go well, because this is a high emotional day, and anything that we can do to help that, we want to do. I don't want
Yeah.
to be a caterer though. I don't staffing for catering. Just no, that's too much for me. I don't want to do that. We did offer coordination services many years ago. Um, and it was fine. We could have continued to do that. We had separate staff doing it, so it wasn't necessarily a staffing issue. It just got to be emotionally too stressful for me,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even if it's not the coordinator's job, if it's not in your scope of service, if anything goes wrong, it doesn't matter. It's the wedding day. You've got to figure it out. And so I just don't know that I had the long-term emotional capacity to keep providing coordination services.
I'm so glad that you said that. So for people that are listening, I think this is really important because at our venue, we are deep in the weeds with our clients. We're absolutely full service planning, catering, all in-house, cake, flowers, DJs, the whole deal. And it is hard. And I think a lot of people see the glam of all inclusive and what that could mean. And I have a lot of people reach out to me, even with consulting, and I've helped them transition to all inclusive. And across the board, they're like, oh my goodness, I did not realize how hard this was going to be. And you have to be prepared, not just being a very, very type A organized person in order to add all of those thousands of decisions that you're going to be going through with the bride and groom. And on top of that, there is an emotional toll that it takes on you, 100%, because you are, again, you're down in the nitty gritty details with them. You're knowing what's going on with the family dynamics, and on wedding day, you're in that with them. And it really, really is quite hard. We do need to do a season about just mental health, just wellness in the event space, because it really is quite a big deal. And I've been right there with you, where I've people have been so hard that I've questioned if I even wanted to own a venue anymore. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to buy some land in the middle of Wyoming and never see another human again.
Well, and part of that is we work so closely with our couples, so many decisions, months of decisions, and we get it to where they're happy. They've made the decisions they want. We're going to give them the day they want. Well, then you've got guests, relatives, distant relatives who have expectations about what they think it should be, what their wedding would be like. And if
Yes.
it's not what the couple has chosen, they get angry, they get bent out of shape. And they think it's our policy. Well, this venue's terrible because they didn't let my friends come in and, or party past 11 a.m. Well, I'm used to go until 2 in the morning. Okay, well, we talked about the timeline. The couples knew this before they booked it. That's just our county's policy. Or we've had couples say, I'm not a night owl. I can't stay up that late anymore. I
Yeah.
want an earlier wedding. And so then maybe the wedding ends by 9 o'clock, and then the guests are disappointed. Where's my alcohol? Where's my dance floor? Well, these are the decisions that the couple made. This is what they wanted for their wedding. I didn't have, that was not my decision.
My goodness. Sometimes I shouldn't be proud of this, but I guess it's, 30 years dealing with people in the wedding industry. But when they come to the bar and they're just like, they don't like the options that are at the bar. And I just simply say, this is the menu that the bride and groom chose. And actually last weekend I said that. And then I said, I'm so sorry they didn't call you to ask what you wanted at the bar. We had it was a lady that we had been joking with back and forth. And so it was fine. But I was being quite passive aggressive. And I was like, I'm sorry they didn't ask you what you wanted to drink at their wedding.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like, are you crazy? Like, are you crazy? Like, you just come here and you just think that we need to cater to you. You're not even, like, I don't know. It's so funny. People are fascinating. We say that all of the time on our staff and our full-time staff meet once a week, and we kind of go over the previous weekend's weddings, and we talk about what went well and what didn't. And I let them kind of vent about, their experiences, and then we erase their names from our whiteboard and we purge those people from our brains. But we just say it all the time. People are fascinating. They're just fascinating. They're entertaining.
That's a very
But
kind way of putting it.
let's there's meaner things that we could say for sure. Let's end with just one little question as we're talking about mental health and all of that, and just the toll that people could take in this industry. It is quite hard. What is something that you do in your life that is completely unrelated to weddings, that is just for you, to help keep you sane as a wedding venue owner? Tell us all about it.
It is hard because wedding business, it feels like it's 24/7, it is nonstop. Or it could be if you let it. There's always
Yes.
email, there's always a call, there's always a decision to make. But I have learned over the past recent years, I was not always good at this, but I have learned that you have to step away, as hard as it is. And I know we've talked about this before, but we both have a similar background. I am a figure skater. I am on an adult competitive synchronized skating team. We travel around the country doing about 4 or 5 competitions. It's crazy. Our season is basically the fall and winter, which is, busy wedding season too. But I'm on the ice about 4 days a week. That makes it sound like I'm a lot better than I am. So I don't have the skills of like the people you see, at the Olympics, but I love it so much. I'm going to do my first, I just decided this yesterday with my coach. I think I'm going to do my first solo competition in January. So we just started putting our program together yesterday. So completely unrelated to weddings, and I love it.
I adore that. And when we figured this out maybe a year ago, I don't know what it was, it's been a while. And I just was laughing. I was like, well, first of all, I was jealous because I'm like, I wish I was still doing that, but I have some injuries that have kept me from doing that. But I also was a competitive ice dancer and was also on a synchronized skating team. So there's not many people out there that even do that. And also being venue owners too. It's just such a funny, weird like connection that we have. But with that, I think it really is so very important to do something that is absolutely different from your day-to-day grind to help you not burn out. Because if you're working 24/7, it's not going to be good for you. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your children, your marriage relationship. So I'm really glad that you have that thing that gets you off of your land doing something totally different. I think that's so fantastic. So is there any closing piece of advice that you would have for our listeners today about just anything that you would want to share with them?
Such a broad question. I could go down so many avenues with that one. But we don't know what we don't know. And we learn so much by trial and error. The wedding industry in general is typically, most people are very much a community, and we want to be collaborative and we want to see each other succeed. So things like this podcast, some of these Facebook groups, there are people out there who just want to help. We want to set everybody else up for success because
Absolutely.
if there's another venue who's undercutting their prices or has policies that are unsustainable, either they're going to impact the venue community in their area, or those owners are going to burn out and, kind of crash and burn. And there are so many resources in this industry that I just think sharing information and being helpful and supportive of one another. If you have a question, ask it to somebody. Somebody else has been through it for sure. And there's a lot to learn, and I just hope everybody has the desire to learn and to make themselves the best they can be.
I could not have said it better myself. So as you guys are listening, please be sure, go into the show notes, go follow 48 Fields, and their website is 48fields.com. Nice and easy to remember, but their social media is so beautiful. Be sure and go give them a follow. And I could tell you, like Kelly was saying, there are so many people that are eager and excited to help you be successful. And so be sure and follow Kelly. She's always a wealth of information for sure. And I'll just tease out to you that she is also a great educator in the venue space and has some exciting things coming down the line. And we will touch on that in some future episodes. But I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for your heart and love for this industry and the things that you contribute to all of us. We've all learned from you greatly. So thank you for being on the show today. Be sure to subscribe to my channel to be notified of future episodes. And if you would like to be a guest on my show, there's a link in our show notes to apply. Thanks for being on again, Kelly, and we'll see you on the next episode.